Hello and welcome to this session. I think it's the fifth one, maybe not. I'm losing count. It's been a while. Last time this was supposed to have been on, I was actually at the Savage Pagan Conference. So hopefully those of you on the YouTube channel should be able to pick up the talk I did there. So for this one, and as usual, I'm doing a dual broadcast here. I'm doing a recording for YouTube, and for Second Life we're live with people here. Hopefully you're going to listen and possibly type away as someone is now typing. So this obviously will then be uploaded to YouTube probably in the next couple of days. Yep, let me just send the YouTube link to everybody here, because obviously, bear with me a sec. Oh, crikey. I'm going a bit crazy here. Let's just get this sorted. Okay. There you go. Right, anyway, so this session is on amulets and sigils. It's probably one of my favourites, mainly because, and if you've been following all the other sessions that I've been doing, the general gist is that I work primarily in visualised astral magic form. Sort of changing a bit now after all these years, after the last 2 or 3 decades. I'm now sort of not quite going completely back to the physical reality of doing my craft, but it's be a bit of a mix. It's creeping in, but even so, within my physical practice I make use of symbolism, as we generally all do anyway, because symbolism is a very powerful thing and can encapsulate a lot of stuff that's intent within the mind that verbally could be quite complex or difficult to vocalize or write down or whatever. So this session in particular has had a huge impact on my recent booklet on spellcraft. It's called Forging Magical Intent. So, you know, my website, House of Kia Co UK. Obviously, if you've come through YouTube, then you would have got it anyway. So, one of the main reasons that I use symbolism to this extent is that I'm not great at poetry. And then, okay, in a way, this session, from those of you who've got the notes, will probably get completely thrown, because a lot of this stuff's not going to be in the notes, because it's brand new. So yeah, I'm not great at poetry, and I sort of realised fairly early on in my path that I may as well just skip the notes, skip writing stuff too much, because I just can't do that beautiful stuff that people can knock out quite quick. And looked at more natural talents that I have, and for me my natural talent is my mind, my imagination. And so I went down creating images and focus purely on symbolism as a means to formulate the intent that I can then use out and about on whatever I want to use it for. So that has an impact on the daily stuff, not quite the daily stuff, but on the ritual stuff. Also, what I found fairly okay, we've got someone's just arrived. Let me just deal with this. Right, so hopefully, yeah. So, Okay. This is going to be a bit of a disruption here. Hang on, sorry. Right, okay. So, luckily for me, and okay, they've gone. Hopefully they may come back. They may have just gone in to realise they need to put switch. Yeah, I know. Poof, there they go. They come and go. Hopefully they've gone to switch the voice on and realised they couldn't switch it on, just like the problem I had earlier. Anyway, let's get back to the topic. Yes, so an interesting aspect that, well, not an aspect, quandary I had earlier in my path is that I'm Kemetic. I work with Egyptian deities. I work with the gods, Egyptian magic. It became quite obvious that they have a love for amulets. They have a love for lots and lots of amulets, and I think I can't obviously say for all traditions because some information's been lost over the years, but I think Egyptians probably were fanatical about their amulets, for not just necessarily the stuff to do with the dead, but even for the living. Amulets everywhere. And it sort of produced this issue as far as I was concerned about, well, if I'm working mostly in visualised astral magic form or in my mind, these physical things are going to be a problem because I'm not working in a physical way. So what can I do? Because amulets are useful. The symbolism, and again, symbolism is a very powerful thing to encapsulate a lot of concepts into a single form that can be easily communicated to all those that also understand what that symbolism is and the context that you apply it. So I had a look at a variety of different forms of Egyptian amulets and how could I make use of them. Imagination is very useful. We can create the whole concept of these particular amulets. The colour, the shape, the size, all of the material and so on. But, you know, it can take a fair bit of concentration. And, okay, I have the concentration, I have the capability to visualise these complex forms. But when under stress, particularly if I would say out and about and a situation arose that I required to cast a protection spell of some kind, or I was in need of protection or a boost of some kind, then having to enter some kind of complex meditative state to formulate the focus enough to get the image could be a bit of an inconvenience, especially if it's quite a complex shape and times of the efforts. For example, you know, if I'm driving, I obviously don't want to shut my eyes for very long, if at all, preferably not at all. And okay, while I can visualise with my eyes open, for some people that's called scrying. I've mentioned this a couple of times. Constantinus's book on summoning spirits, he mentions that scrying is dreaming with eyes open. So after a while it does become possible to visualise these things, these shapes and images without having to enter a meditative state. You can just create them at will. And you know, and those of you who sort of practice, say, Reiki, you know, there's sometimes symbols involved there, which you most likely, yeah, it's not a difficult thing, but some people do find it difficult. So what did I do? Now, for some amulets, some symbols are more amenable, certainly more suitable for this particular kind of approach. And I've got a few examples. And now with the magic of YouTube, instead of me just trying to describe them, which I will have to do for you guys here in Second Life until you get over to watch the video, because I don't have pictures I can throw up because I don't write, so I can't throw any images up on Second Life. So there's a number of amulets I looked at that were in varying degrees of ease of working with these things. And actually I'm going to come to that after, because I think there was something else I was going to look at first. It's been a while since I've done this one. What's the whole point of, well, not the whole point, what kind of symbolism do we find in amulets? There's, and forgive me, I do use the word amulet a lot, but I also mean that, sorry, I've got the window open because it's quite warm in here, so that was just a car hurtling down the road for some bizarre reason. I use amulets, the word amulet, to also cover talismans. Some people class them as two different things. With Egyptian magic, it tends to be the same thing. It's just down to the context of what it actually is. But, you know, some will say amulets are an empowerment thing, whereas amulets are protective, external, and talismans are an internal thing. Yeah, it's all semantics. It doesn't really matter. The symbolism and the context of whatever this item actually is will give you which way it's going to go. So, but what I had in the text for about to sort of describe the varying levels that amulets function on is sort of an analysis of one particular amulet. Now this one may or may not exist, who really knows, but you know, I was trying to find one that works quite simply to describe. And so a snake charm, as an act of repelling or attracting, because you know, you may want to actually control and summon a snake. If you're with the goddess Mutsinga, then you know, snakes are your thing. So what you could do when also, although you know you're going to be watching this, if you're watching this on YouTube and I'm rubbing my eyes a lot, I'm shattered. I've been out all day looking at ancient trees and paddling in spring water, and I'm shattered and I'm hot and I'm tired, so things are going to go a little bit weird, and I've got some mead because I need something cold. 600-year-old tree at least. It was immense. It was beautiful. Anyway, but that's a different thing. So yes, this snake charm. So there are varying levels that amulets function on. There's the literal form, where you know you could have a symbol of a snake. It could just be a wriggly snake, and full description, sort of details of any particular kind of snake or whatever. You know, you could have deities of a snake deity so that it can act as a repellent, or take on the power of the deity associated with snakes so that you can control them, repel them, or whatever it is you want to do with them. That's a sort of a very literal, and there's a lot of Egyptian amulets and a lot of other amulets that sort of match that kind of style. Then you get down to sort of slightly more abstract forms. So you could have a forked stick to represent the snake's tongue. That's a fairly abstract form, but it's quite an easy connection with between the snake and the stick. Then you'll go to really abstract stuff, just a piece of string or a very small piece of wiggly piece of wood or whatever material you want to use. Or you could go to, I think, a very abstract, I probably wouldn't even consider this one personally, but say a ball of string to cause entanglement as a trap to contain the snake. That's if you want to repel it, for example. So there's sort of varying levels that you can function on. Colour and material also plays a part, especially in Egyptian amulets. They were fairly, for some bizarre reason, certain materials were assigned to specific things, and I'm sure the same with many other paths that have correspondences or whatever. It's, for me, I think that for some of the Egyptian amulets in particular, not so much the material, but it's the colour. Obviously the material will have a particular colour to it, and they were more interested in the colour as opposed to what the material is. You know, give them a few different crystals and they probably wouldn't really care, but if it was after a particular colour, then that would show the interest. Whereas now we tend to go more along the physical material type. So a variety of different abstract forms, and I've got plenty to go with. So they sort of play to a number of degrees. You've got a psychological aspect to some extent, in that unlike a spell, you would create the intent in your head, do some magic to push it out there, and it's job done. But for amulets, they are a constant thing, and not necessarily requiring any particular magical skill in which to operate them. For example, Egyptians again, and forgive me if I keep coming back to the Egyptians, but that's my path, so I will keep going down that route for comparisons. But they used to churn out millions of amulets for daily life constantly. It was a major manufacturing process. And but within Egyptian magic, it would only be the using the word, lost the word, literate, that's the one. The literate, the priestly caste, those that are educated would do, who knew the magic, the words to use. The general populace wanted to have something, much like, you know, like now when someone has an amulet, they want to gain a power or attribute that amulet possesses, but they don't necessarily know the magic to enact it, to practice it themselves. They could create a spell to have the same effect as the amulet, but if they don't have the capability, then they'll want something they can just buy or whatever and use. So amulets have been around for thousands of years, no problem with buying stuff that somebody's house made, because it's the symbolism that's associated with it. Now, the crucial aspect here, as opposed to creating a spell, is that because you don't have the magical skill, you could do, but let's for the sake of argument say you don't. The fact that it's there all the time, physical, knocking into you, and I've got an amulet, I've been carrying it mostly now. It's not so much an amulet, it's not sure if it could show up on the video. don't want to read too far forward because I got the laptop on my lap. It's the Scorpion, my goddess. And so you would have these, and they would be there as a constant reminder that should you require them, you only have to just put a little bit of conscious realization, acknowledgement that you have it there. So they continue. Now, this fact, well, brilliant for physical amulets, is lacking in a virtualized form, because you don't have a physical thing to constantly knock against you to remind. So that was a tricky one to overcome. Now let's have a look at making use of amulets out and about that we could well have. Now again, obviously my choice being Egyptian, I have a good selection, and I'm just going to pick out 3 to show the kind of levels of complexity we can work with. Let's just take a slug of mead. Oh, yeah, that's good. Throat is dry today. Now, the first one is the easy one, and that is the Ankh, the Egyptian Ankh, the looped cross. Pretty much everybody probably knows that symbol. It's the hieroglyph for life, vitality, and wow, it's a great symbol, and it's a literal word. It is the hieroglyph. So as far as a visualized form to work with, this is probably one of the easiest, because it is a couple of lines, hoop, couple of straight lines after that. It's simple to to keep in the head and to produce at will when required. That's an easy one. Then we come to something slightly more complicated. The Wajat, the Ajat Eye, the Eye of Horus. Not sure if that's showing up very well on the book that I'm holding up. Now, the Eye of Horus is quite a complex symbol. Well, it's a collection of different symbolisms, and while reasonably easy to visualize, it is a bit of a complex one. Now, the worst one to work with, which unfortunately is also one of the best symbols, is the beetle, the dung beetle. It is a rather tricky one to actually visualize. It's well, ovoid. Yeah, they are. It's a useful. It's one of the most powerful amulets, and it actually was the most popular Egyptian amulet they ever produced, because actually it's quite an easy thing to carve, because, well, it's just a lump, and but it's not the easiest thing to possibly model inside your mind as far as a visualized form goes. So for me, I just don't bother with the dung beetle. Oh, I am really fading rapidly now. So picking the right shape to work with. Now, the crucial thing here is that the Ankh in particular also calls to mind those other paths, say Northern tradition, where you have the Outer Fulthark and runes in play, because that also bears a very It is. The Ankh is a very common symbol and it's a very useful, powerful one. But the Ankh and, okay, a lot of Egyptian hieroglyphs are preferred to be very artistically rendered because the Egyptian hieroglyphs, each one on its own is a word of the gods. It is a divine symbol. So you would normally really put a lot of effort into them. But the fact that some of the most basic rendition of Egyptian hieroglyphics, and say the Ankh in particular, is that they have a similarity in the outer fourth arc in the runes. Now, I learnt a little bit of hieroglyphics many years ago, and then pushed it to one side because it was just a very complex thing to learn. And so I then went into the fourth arc and working with runes until I found that I really didn't have any affinity with that tradition because I'm Kemetic. I couldn't really engage with Odin and all of that lots to any depth because it's like learning a completely different path. So yeah, I know some people work with these multiple paths, but I'm purely Kemetic. So I sort of abandoned the runes quite a long time back, mostly, but I still use a number of them because of the value that I place on the symbolism involved. The Sen, the Fire rune, Rad rune, the Travel rune, a couple of others. But the thing that draws them all together is that they are two-dimensional shapes. Just simple lines, black and white or whatever colour, you know, two colour shapes that can be easily drawn or easily visualised. And so that has been generally the way I've preferred to go, in that the simplest shapes are easy to recall. Now, obviously, you know, when I said earlier that if I'm driving or so on, then I am likely not to want to close my eyes at any point. So the use of symbols that require very little work to form are ideal. I've also extended that over the recent years by making my own sort of runic symbols, you know, and I think I mentioned that. I'm going to have to do a session purely on that. Stay tuned up for my YouTube stuff. That's another thing I need to do. Although I think I've covered it in a couple of other places, but I forget now. So, keeping things simple aids in a number of ways, in that it doesn't require, well, it requires effort, but minimal effort in which to use them. I tend to work quickly and spontaneously, apart from any major festivals. I just do things when I can, and so having to plan or set time aside to actually perform anything is just not the way I go on the daily stuff. So having a handful of these in my head helps. Let's think now. Sort of, I'm not sure. I can't remember when a major sort of parallel with this, and the other half of the title as far as this session goes is Sigils. Sigil magic is a sort of an offshoot of an early part of my path, and sort of went hand in hand with the visualization side. I was sort of introduced to chaos magic in the early 90s via an online group that I was involved with on Kix, CIX, and there was a lot of chaos magicians there, and that sort of got me interested because it was all very geeky, and I'm really quite a geeky and science-based kind of guy. So I started to explore sigil magic, which really appealed because this followed really pretty much the same sort of flow as the visualized amulets and the runic stuff, in that it is all about creation of symbols from your consciousness. Don't know if anyone here, I'm sure some of you here has probably dabbled in sigil magic. It's a very common aspect to many paths. But anyway, now what I sort of cottoned on before I sort of really got fully into sigil magic, modern sigil magic tends to follow the Austin Osman Spare method, which is the creation of the intent in simplified form, remove duplicate letters, vowels, or however you want to sort of chop down the letters and put them into a very abstract form, and then mush it around, create something shape, and just abstract it down and reduce down until there's no sort of full connection with the intent to whatever shape it is you've piece of art that you've produced, and then you empower it, project it out in a variety of different ways. Spare used to go for the ecstatic methods of sort of sex, drugs, alcohol, anger, strong emotions, and then just forget about it. So I sort of, before I was fully aware of that, then I was sort of going along similar lines of abstracting it down. Didn't really ever empower it the same way, and because of the amulet stuff that I kept within my mind, because, you know, it's great, you know, you cast a spell or you create a sigil and you cast it and let it go, never to be remembered again. But with amulets you tend to hang on to them because they're reusable. That's the whole concept, is that they linger and you can reuse them on a regular basis for whenever you need them. So with the sigils that I used to produce, they fulfilled pretty much the same kind of thing. Yep, sure, some would be directed at a particular one-off event and probably wouldn't revisit it, but if the intent was sort of not specific, for example, good weather for camping, now when I cast it, it's most likely going to be specifically for the next camping trip. Obviously, why else would I cast it? But because that intent is good weather for camping, it's a fairly nondescript, as in non-specific to that particular next event. Therefore I can keep the same amulet sigil and reuse it for the next one, as long as there's a good enough gap between, you know, I wouldn't say I'll cast it now and then I'm going to cast it in a day or two time for the event some weeks following, because that just doesn't make any sense, is, you know, the context is wrong. So, you know, if the sigil is sigil amulet, you know, I'm sort of mixing things here, but they work for me. May not work for you, but well, that's just the way it goes. So it becomes an amulet, it becomes something I regularly use, therefore I find it gains a deeper connection, because with the creation of an amulet or sigil for whatever reason, especially if it's a one-off, you're taking that concept, that intent, formulating it into an image or shape of words or whatever, and then you're pushing it out, and you're just directly translating and moving it, shifting it from one place from your mind to somewhere else. Well, for amulets, for me to find value from them, I'm taking them back in, letting them sort of bounce around it. That sounds bad, bounce around inside my head. There's not a lot in there sometimes. But constant reuse becomes a deeper level on the subconscious, on the psyche. It becomes familiar. It becomes a very connected tool. So as long as I can find a reuse for it, then I'll do it. It's hard to become sort of one way or the other. I don't sort of go, I'm going to create this and it has to be reusable. Obviously, if it is that specific and I want that clarity of intent to go all the way through to be that precise about the outcome, then I'm going to give the whole reusability stuff a miss, because it is a one-off thing, and why would then I want to then repeat it? It's the practicality of stuff. If it can be reusable, reuse it. I do not find a problem with that. It's handy to have an array of tools that you can call upon to produce desired results. It saves having to scratch your head and come up with something new and original every single time, because that just, for most of us, doesn't happen, which is another reason of when I said earlier at the very beginning about poetry being something that puts people off for spellcasting. And I had that at one of my beginners workshops I did last month, is that someone said they don't cast spells because there's an intimidation of having to create something wonderful in a poetic means. Now, to be honest, if you're solitary, who gives a flying what's it if it's a perfect rhyme? Rhyming and poetry helps with memory and recall, and it helps a group to build some energy. If you're the only one there, who cares a toss about it creating something easy for you to remember? So, just give it a miss. I'm rubbish at poetry, I don't try. So, I was forgetting where I was going with this now. Hang on, let's take a slug of mead, and the thing that cures all ills. It certainly makes them a bit easier sometimes. No, that hasn't helped. Okay, I was forgetting where I was going with that. Yes, haiku. Well, that's even worse. I cannot do those haikus. I don't get them at all. They're beautiful, and when I see friends do them, they are amazing. But I don't have that sort of real control of words to get that far. I don't find value in them. Now, that's a bit of a shame, because words are extremely powerful and fundamental to my particular path. I've got a bit of cramp. I've gone stuck. Ouch. Because, as I said earlier, words are Heka. They are words of the gods. They are power. So, having to work too much with them is, again, a bit of a challenge. Ow. Cramp. So, it's Yeah, I'm getting old. And I've done a few miles walking today. So it's I find working this way an interesting challenge. It is different. Working with symbols we all use, and there's hang on, I need to have there's a couple of books. There's quite a few books, obviously, on symbolism. They're everywhere, but what I particularly like is this one. It's Sigils, Ciphers and Scripts by M.B. Jackson. I picked this up at one of my favourite bookshops at Treadwell's. I go in there and spend an absolute fortune sometimes. I haven't been up to London for a while yet. I need to do that and pay them a visit. But that's you know, that has loads of different sort of symbols and all sorts in there. There's another one by Nigel Pennick, I think his name is. I can't see where that is on my shelf at the moment, so you know, there's plenty. If you pull symbolism from the characters that are in your language, and it doesn't matter whether it's magical or non-magical language, it's all what happens inside the head, which is where the trigger goes. So, you know, for example, when you're creating the sigil magic, the magic isn't actually in the sigil. It's the act of creating and translating that concept within the mind and into a new form. That is when the magic happens, and it only becomes a trigger to release in that shape that you've created, and then you activate it and that releases it as a sort of a battery kind of thing. It's just a metaphor. So there are many ways to symbolic magic, to sigil magic, to visualized amuletic magic. It's sometimes a unregarded kind of approach to it. You know, we all like our bits of jewelry and so on, and always makes me laugh in the Mummy film, the very first one, Benny, the little cretin that helps the mummy come back to life, him and all his sort of amulets that he has all around his neck. That's amusing. But they are a useful thing. So everyone's been quiet, apart from you. apart from you. Apart from you. Oh, that's okay, Al. This is the whole point. You know. Oh, I know. Hello, Angela. So you know, the whole point is that I've got some notes here. I'm going to give you out in Second Life lot those notes, and you can read them. And it's boring if I was just to read those notes to you when you could perfectly read them yourself. The whole point here is that I throw in some new stuff, and you can ask questions. And I should have said that earlier, but most of you have been here before, so you all know. And you know, even you lot on YouTube, comments, welcome. I'm always willing to deviate from my notes, and I've probably completely blown those notes away today because I don't remember any of them apart from a couple of bits. You know, if you have questions, then you ask, and you never be afraid to ask. So, you know, we've got a quarter of an hour left officially for this session, so we can either cut now, because I think I'm done, maybe. But you know, let me just throw out the notes. Yeah, it's been a long day, and I don't do heat, and it's been a long hot day. let me just throw out the notes to everybody here, and you know, while you're looking, while you're waiting, if you've got any questions, throw it. And you lot on YouTube, I'm not sure if I've got the YouTube link, because you guys here can probably have that. That's the link for the YouTube. This whole session will be, for what it's worth, will be on YouTube in a couple of days. So if anyone's got any questions, fire away. I don't even care if they're not even connected with this, because I'm not going to be at Jen's class tomorrow, so because I've got a moot on. So I'm just going to take another swig of mead. I'm going to have to top the class up in a sec. Yay. Yeah, well, this is actually one of my bottle of, I think, my very first. It's about, it's faded so much. Yeah, November 2015. I think this is my very first batch. It was horrible, but alright, okay, cool. You're one of my YouTubers, fine. You know where it is then. So, I'm going to have to probably do a YouTube on mead making. I've got loads. Anyway, okay. I'm just going to ramble on otherwise. So what we'll do, let's wind up. So, thank you for coming along. This should be up shortly. And, well, I don't know. I'll be around Tuesday. Nordmead. Haha. Skyrim. You're welcome, everyone. So yes, this will probably be up Tuesday. I'm out, as I said, I'm at Moot tomorrow night, so although you never know, I might actually get this one out. Yeah, I might get this one out tonight. You never know. But anyway, so thanks for coming along. Any questions, anytime, just ask. I am easy to find. So I'm going to go enjoy the rest of this bottle of mead. And you know, it sounds bad, but it's only a small bottle. Night, and let's hopefully next one will be in 2 weeks, and that's on thought forms, another really fun one. So night and take care. I need to switch this video off.